When Timberborn pre-release Update 7 came out, I wanted to do one thing. I wanted to turn the bottom of diorama into a lake. I imagined having the water collecting at the bottom of the map, then layers for trees, food, storage, and industry above it, and a beaver fun land on top. What was it about Update 7 that made me want to do this? Update 7 added 3D terraforming to Timberborn. Before, you had to build dirt blocks on top of other dirt blocks. Now you can build floors or ceilings of dirt with air underneath. And why do this on the diorama map? Diorama is the smallest map in the game, and there is this thing in the Timberborn community of making Beaver Cube-esque reworks of diorama, with as much as possible packed into the map, and that's inspired this idea. I love the space management element of playing on the small Timberborn maps. It's my sort of challenge. While I worked on this project, I decided to take screenshots so I could review everything once I was done, and I had a nice time looking back at them, so I thought I'd share. This is the first screenshot I took. I was playing on hard mode, so I had been very focused on the basics for the first 6 cycles. I started with a farmhouse and kohlrabi, a gatherer's flag for blueberries, and a water pump, all built on day 1. For the rest of the first cycle, I built a dam to keep the kohlrabi and some trees growing during the droughts, and then I put in a breeding pod and started on some science. After that, I needed a bad tide solution. In this game, when you don't get a drought season, you get a bad tide, where your water supply is contaminated with toxic levels of radiation. I built this little contraption at the bottom of the waterfall, which forces water over the side of the map when the floodgates are closed. Then, when there's bad tide, that's where the toxic water went. I got a bit fanciful after that, and decided to box in the corner where the river flows off the map to make a reservoir for pumping drinking water. I did this at the end of a previous game on diorama, and I thought it worked really well, and I wanted to repeat that. Now I could take my water pumps out of my irrigation water. Speaking of irrigation water, I wanted to store some more of that, so I built a nice dam. I gathered up some metal to build sluices that only let good water off the top of the hill and divert bad tides off the map. Then I built the actual dam in 2 halves, starting at the bottom so it could start storing water, then building the top half. There is a sluice at the bottom to let water into the river during a drought and keep the crops irrigated. While that was happening, I dynamited the drinking water reservoir to the bottom of the map, ready for the next stage of the build. I wanted to move my industry off the nice green space that I could grow something on, and I thought the best place to put it would be on top of the drinking water reservoir. At this point, I had decided that the lake I would create at the bottom of the map would be 4 tiles deep, because it would be impossible for that to evaporate in a 30-day drought, which is the longest drought on hard mode. I built my industry area on 5x5 metal platforms on top of 3 high wooden platforms to get the 4-tile depth. This took a lot of metal, so I had to send some beavers down a mine. Until this point, I hadn't been 100% certain if I would use bots or not. I was worried about how fast beavers would get injured in a mine. I'd only ever used bots in mines. But it was fine. I paused my industry buildings, sent those beavers down the mine for a few days until my scrap storage was full, then sent them all back to their regular jobs. The numbers of injured beavers were only slightly worse than in their usual jobs in the industrial district, and I had plenty of medical beds for them. I was happy about this because when I played diorama before, I found it difficult to plant enough trees for all the planks and gears that I needed to make bots. Now the industrial district was built, with a layer of storage underneath and a couple of rows of industrial buildings on top. It was time to upgrade the power. I built a bad water discharge on the bad water source. If you don't know, this is an iron teeth building that makes it so bad water source can always be turned on, even in a drought. I built an aqueduct of water wheels to be turned by that bad water, and I built that on top of the industry. I wanted to save space on this tiny map. Because I planned to move the industry to a layer of its own, I made sure that none of the supports for the bad water power aqueduct were built on top of the industry platform. They all connect to the reservoir levees or to the ground. This way, the industry can all be dismantled without affecting power production. To help keep the beavers happy, I used the space where the industry had been to grow some new food, and I dynamited out a space under the hill where the water source is to store all of that. And you can also see the dam reservoir is twice as big now. Now I felt I had everything ready to start terraforming, apart from an excavator. I'd filled a lot of space on the map, so I ended up building it on top of the water source hill. I built it an extract tank and a tubeway over the dam reservoir, so that the beavers could bring extract over from the industrial district. Then, I realised I had missed whichever patch notes it was where the devs said that the excavator doesn't need extract anymore, so that was a bit annoying. Now I actually had what I needed to start terraforming. I tried to finalise my plan. This is what I came up with. The left-hand dynamite represents the 4 layers of water for the lake. The right-hand dynamite is air, and gaps are where the dirt layers are planned to be. The dirt layers are 2 tiles thick. There would be 4 air tiles between each dirt layer because that's how tall the tree is. I realised I couldn't have as many dirt layers as I'd wanted. With a massive lake at the bottom, I only had space for 3 layers, not 4 or 5. That didn't bother me. I decided I would build the layers I could, and then see how I wanted to distribute things. For my first bit of terraforming, I moved the lower part of the tree farm up a level. This turned out to be the wrong level. It needed to be one higher, but oh well, I'll move it again later. This pillar layout is something I saw JC the Beard experiment with. It is satisfying visually, but it is a bit crowded for anything other than the lower water tank level. After a bit of umming and ahhing, I decided to continue this piecemeal approach to terraforming. My next focus was the old blueberry patch. I ripped it out and dynamited down to the bottom of the map. I then built supports to let me build the first layer of dirt. The supports are in strips, because this took less thinking than precisely placing individual supports, and I thought it would make it easier to adjust things when I decided what the permanent support design would be. Now I had some ground that would be permanent, I moved the cornfield there, and terraformed the space where the cornfield was. I did this a bit differently. At this point I'd settled on continuing the dirt pillars from under the tree farm, across the rest of the water tank, so I added the pillars as I built the level above, and then dynamited around the pillars to the bottom of the map. I really got into building the levels, so I went for it and started on the second layer. To help beavers move around, I built a central tubeway, like a lift, in a central pillar. There's also a power shaft in there. If you pay attention, as I develop the central pillar, you'll see that I built some very poorly thought out spiral staircases as well. I was starting to get the sense that the beaver storage in the centre was in the way, and wanted to move the barracks up to the higher level. But that was going to be a lot of work, so I moved the field of crops up to the third layer, while I made room for the new beaver storage. I felt a bit sad moving those fields, because I felt like I only just set them up. But this was no time for sentiment. The terraforming beast was on the move, and things needed to be moved out the way. I built some space on the third level, the top level, and moved all the storage that I built under the hill. The storage in the hill had, by happenstance, been built at the right height for level 1. I added to the relocated storage with extra warehousing and building materials. Then I casually made a sky town for the beavers. This luxury precarious condo makes use of the build limit above the terrain limit and has some upgrades on the entertainment facilities. This is the beavers' permanent home, so I spent some hours with the game paused while I designed it. I'm very happy with it. With almost everything moved up, there was space to bomb out where the beavers used to live. From here on in this video, there are also beavers hollowing out space for the lake at the bottom, but that's not visible in the screenshots. I also took a moment to improve the power infrastructure by adding another layer to the power aqueduct above the existing one. Hopefully doubling the power would be enough for everything the beavers needed. The biggest thing left in the way was a tree farm. I made a little grove on level 1 for blueberries and some oak. I thought with 2,500 logs in storage and a lot of log base building complete, this would be enough until I built the new tree farm. I basically just ripped out the trees and the dirt from the old farm and built it new from the ground up. Now, to get the rest of the terraforming done, a decision needed to be made about how levels 2 and 3 would be supported and irrigated. I counted how far a 3x3 pond irrigates, It's about 14 tiles in a straight line, and settled on this pattern with dirt pillars with a diagonal distance of 7 tiles between them. So long as there's water on top of the pillars, it would make everything lush green. Those dirt pillars were too far apart to support the dirt for the floor above. To add support without losing floor space, I designed a perimeter with 2 high platforms, a tubeway on top, and overhang platforms on top of that. I like this design. I particularly like how the beavers can use the tubeway to build the overhangs. It did have a bit of a problem though. It didn't support quite enough dirt. There were some small holes. So I did what any good designer would do, and I ignored that problem and started placing level 2. Here you can see more clearly the support tubeway overhang structure that will support the next layer. By this point, I had squeezed in a second excavator to try and speed up dirt collection, along with moving beavers between the excavators, mine, industry, and medical beds, trying to keep up with the resources that I needed. Steadily, and not too slowly, the Beaver Cube was starting to look how I imagined it. I had most of the dirt placed for the 3 levels, and the TNT was ready to go for the big clear out of the ground floor lake. To finish off those levels, I needed to figure out some final details for the infrastructure. These were a final power production upgrade. 2 layers was not enough. Where was I going to pump drinking water from on a permanent basis, and where was the industry going to go? I built the 3rd and actually final layer of the power aqueduct and converted the dam reservoir into the pumping reservoir. My intention was that this would be where the drinking water was pumped from. A large tank on the top would store water for irrigation. When that was full, it would overflow into this pumping reservoir, and then leftovers would fill the big lake at the bottom and look pretty. I like to keep pumping and irrigation reservoirs separate, so I can't accidentally pump out all my irrigation water. At this point, I thought the large surface area of the basement lake would let water evaporate too quickly, so I didn't want to pump there for the long term. The optics of having water in the lake all the time was very important to my design. Next, I decided the industry was actually going to stay where it was. Now there wasn't space for a dedicated industry level, and the current setup was working well. So I tidied up some food processing buildings that were grandfathered in after the original industrial platform was built, and don't they look lovely? But I needed a new place for storage that was crowding layer 3, as its temporary location needed to become a beaver paradise. So I stacked some platforms, heaped all the storage on top, with a little extra production for materials I would need for building a wonder. And then I squeezed back in some water pumping next to the industry because, well, the new pumping reservoir wasn't actually big enough. Finally, the edges of the dirt layers could be filled in, and the main terraforming was done. Please enjoy this lovely journey of screenshots from the top to the bottom of the map, and then back up to the top again. The tree farm and food levels were still being irrigated by 3x3 holes and water dumps, so now was time for the pièce de résistance, a park of beaver entertainments with ponds that would water the crops via the dirt pillars between the levels. I built this huge reservoir that took forever to build, but I didn't want it to be too small. I had just made that mistake with the pumping reservoir. I was so happy to see the park come together. I finished it off with a scattering of trees from some foresters. When you remove the planting zone, trees, blueberry bushes, and coffee bushes can spread on their own. They will do this in a random placement within their tile, instead of the perfect grid pattern that the foresters plant in, and use this to give a natural woodland look to the edges of the top level. Finally, the Beaver Cube just needed some time for the trees to spread and grow, and the beavers to build their wonder. This was a super fun game of Timberborn. I don't usually do dramatic terraforming projects, and when I do, I find they take too long. But at this scale, it was actually fun. Having a vision and a bit of a plan to start with probably helped too. My main disappointment in this playthrough was the pumping tank. It's too small a reservoir for the needs of the population. I wish I could have planned it better and given it more space, or be more confident in the amount of water storage in the lake at the bottom and just pumped it out of there. The basement lake is really cool, just as I thought it would be. I would definitely build that again. And there are so many things that I'm happy with for this build. I love the power aqueduct, I love how it hovers over the factories, I love the storage pile on top of the factories. I enjoyed realising that I could build bulk storage into the hill. I've used that idea on every map I've played since this. I had the best time constructing the compact beaver sky tower and the park underneath it. I think it's so cool how the ponds at the top irrigate the whole map. I hope you found something interesting in this video. Do you play Timberborn? What's your favourite thing that you've